This is the story of a guy named Ryan. I've known Ryan since college. Always the kind of guy who loved a thrill, especially if it came with a good scare. But what happened to him one late autumn night changed everything. He still won't talk about it much, but I'm going to tell you what I know. It's not just any scary story. It's one that will make you think twice before stepping into any dark tunnel. Ryan and his friends, Ben, Lisa, and Mark, were all thrill seekers. They had grown bored of the usual haunted houses and ghost stories and wanted something different. One night, Ryan suggested exploring the old mining tunnel near their town, a place everyone avoided because of its creepy reputation. The tunnel was closed off years ago after a collapse, but the old entrance still stood, half buried by dirt and vines. "It's perfect," Ryan said. "Dark, abandoned, and totally off limits." They decided to go after sunset, armed with flashlights and a bit of bravado. As they reached the tunnel entrance, the sun was almost gone, and the cold night air crept into their bones. The black hole of the tunnel looked like a dark mouth waiting to swallow them whole. "Let's just get in and out quick," Lisa warned, but Ryan waved her off. "Where's your sense of adventure?" They stepped inside. At first, everything was quiet, except for the sound of their footsteps echoing on the rocky floor. The walls were rough and damp, covered in dirt and old graffiti. The flashlight beams cut through the darkness, but the tunnel seemed endless. After about 10 minutes, they started hearing something strange. A faint tapping sound, like nails lightly drumming on stone. It wasn't steady, but came and went, sometimes from the left wall, sometimes behind them. "Did you guys hear that?" Ben whispered, his voice barely audible. "Probably just water dripping," Mark said, but no one really believed it. As they walked deeper, the temperature dropped sharply. Their breath formed clouds in the air, and their skin felt numb. Then, the tapping grew louder, turning into a rhythm, a slow, steady beat, like a warning. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling, and a low rumble echoed through the tunnel. "Earthquake?" Lisa gasped, clutching Ryan's arm. "No, something else," Ryan said, his voice tense. Out of the shadows, a figure appeared. It was a man, tall and thin, with pale skin and sunken eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dark. His clothes were torn and dirty, and his hands were stained with what looked like dried blood. Who are you?" Ryan asked, his flashlight shaking. The man didn't answer. Instead, he started tapping his fingers on the wall in that strange rhythm, then pointed deeper into the tunnel. "We should leave," Lisa said urgently. But Ryan was frozen, his eyes locked on the stranger. Suddenly, the stranger vanished into thin air. Panic took over. They turned to run, but the tunnel had changed. The walls seemed to close in, twisting and warping as if the tunnel was alive. They heard whispers, soft, angry, desperate, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Ryan felt something brush past his leg, cold and slimy. He stumbled and fell. When he looked up, Mark was gone. "Mark!" Lisa screamed, but only silence answered. The whispers turned into screams. Shadows danced on the walls, shapes that twisted and stretched into terrifying faces. Ryan grabbed Lisa and Ben. "We have to get out! Now!" They ran blindly, crashing through the darkness. The tunnel felt endless, the exit always just out of reach. Then Ryan tripped over something, a skeletal hand, brittle and cold. He scrambled back and saw bones scattered across the ground. "We're not alone down here," Ben gasped. Suddenly, a cold breath blew past them, carrying a voice so low it felt like it came from the earth itself. "Stay, forever." The group ran harder than ever. Just as they thought they'd collapse, a flicker of light appeared ahead, the tunnel's mouth. They burst out into the cold night, gasping and shaking. But when they looked back, the tunnel entrance was gone. Just a patch of earth covered in, leaves. Mark was never found. Ryan swears he still hears the tapping and whispers when he's alone, and he warns everyone. Some places are not meant to be explored, because in the darkness, something waits, something that never lets you leave. So, if you ever find an old tunnel, remember Ryan's story, and think twice before stepping inside. This is the story of my cousin Jake. He's a tough guy, always the first to laugh off scary stuff. But after what happened to him in that tunnel, he's never been the same. I want you to listen carefully, because this story isn't like the usual ghost tales. It's real, and it's something you don't forget. Jake and his friends were always up for adventure. One summer night, they decided to explore the old railway tunnel outside their town. It was abandoned for years, dark, creepy, and rumored to be cursed. Nobody dared go near it after sunset. But for Jake and his friends, it was the perfect challenge. They arrived just as the sun was setting. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and pink. The tunnel's entrance looked like a black hole, swallowing all the light. They joked and pushed each other, pretending they weren't scared. Jake took the lead, flashlight in hand, ready to prove he wasn't afraid of anything. The tunnel was narrow and cold. The walls dripped with moisture, and the air smelled like dirt and rust. Their footsteps echoed loudly, mixing with the distant sound of dripping water. Jake felt a chill, but he shrugged it off as just the night air. About 10 minutes in, the flashlight beams caught something strange. On the wall, someone had scratched a message in the dirt. It read, "Turn back before it's too late." Everyone froze. Jake laughed nervously. Probably some kid trying to scare people. But as they moved forward, the air grew heavier. The darkness seemed thicker, almost alive. The deeper they went, the harder it was to breathe. A faint humming noise started, low and steady. None of them said anything, but they all felt it. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and died. Total darkness. Panic hit. Jake fumbled with the flashlight, heart pounding. Then, from the blackness, came a whisper. Soft at first, almost friendly. "Stay. Stay." It wasn't one voice. It was many, echoing, overlapping. The whispers surrounded them, growing louder. Jake grabbed his friend's arms. "We need to get out. Now." They turned to leave, but the tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly. No matter how fast they walked, the exit stayed out of reach. The walls appeared to close in, like the tunnel itself was swallowing them. Then something brushed past Jake's arm, a cold, clammy touch. He spun around but saw nothing. His friends were now trembling, eyes wide. One of them, Mark, whispered, "Did you see her?" "Who?" Jake asked. "The girl. The one who waits here." Jake wanted to laugh, but the fear in their voices was real. Suddenly, a faint light appeared ahead. It was soft, blue, and flickering. They ran toward it. At the source of the light stood a young woman. Her dress was white but dirty, torn in places. Her hair hung in wet strands over her face. She smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was cold, empty. "Why are you here?" she asked. Jake's voice shook. "We were just exploring." Her smile faded. "You shouldn't have come." Behind her, shadows moved like smoke. Dark shapes with glowing red eyes circled the group. Jake felt trapped. The walls vibrated, the air buzzing with a terrible energy. The woman raised her hand and the shadows lunged. Jake screamed and ran. Behind him, he heard his friends calling his name, but their voices were fading, swallowed by the dark. He didn't stop running until he burst out of the tunnel's mouth, gasping for air under the cold night sky. Jake looked back. The tunnel was quiet, empty. He never spoke about what happened inside. His friends disappeared. No one knew where. Some say they vanished that night, lost to the darkness. Jake never went back. He never wanted to. But sometimes, late at night, he calls me, and I swear I hear the whispers too. This is the story of something that happened to me 2 years ago. I've only told a few people because, to be honest, most wouldn't believe it. But I'm going to tell you now. Just promise me one thing. Listen carefully. Don't brush it off as just another scary story. Because what happened in that tunnel still gives me chills every time I think about it. It all started on a cold winter night. I was driving back home after visiting a friend in a small town 3 hours away. I took the old highway because it was faster, and I had driven that route many times before. It's a long, quiet road with barely any traffic at night. Just trees, shadows, and the sound of tires on cold asphalt. Around 11:30 p.m., I was about halfway home when I saw the sign, Hillcrest Tunnel, 2 miles ahead. I had almost forgotten about that tunnel. It's a long one, carved through a mountain, and has a reputation for being creepy. Some people say it's haunted. Others say it's just the echo and bad lighting that mess with your mind. I never believed in any of that. But that night, something was different. As I approached the tunnel, the road dipped slightly, and the temperature inside my car dropped. I turned off the heater earlier because it was getting too hot, but now I felt the cold even through my jacket. The entrance to the tunnel stood in front of me like a giant mouth. My headlights barely lit up. The inside, it was just pitch black. I slowed down and entered. Almost immediately, my radio went static. I thought it was just interference, so I switched it off. The tunnel was longer than I remembered. The walls were damp, and the sound of my tires echoed like I was driving on glass. There were small lights on the ceiling, but half of them were out, flickering or completely dead. The deeper I went, the more I felt like I was being swallowed. Then, I saw someone. A figure was standing on the side of the tunnel facing the wall, completely still. My heart jumped. I swerved slightly, trying not to get too close. As I passed, I glanced at the rearview mirror. They hadn't moved an inch. No reaction to the sound of the car. Nothing. Just standing there in the dark, like a statue. I told myself it was probably a worker or someone whose car broke down. But even then, why stand like that? Why not ask for help? I kept driving, faster. Now, I wanted to get out of there, but the tunnel just kept going. It felt endless. I looked at the dashboard clock. I'd been inside for almost 10 minutes. That couldn't be right. The Hillcrest Tunnel wasn't that long. I should have been out by now. I checked my phone. No signal. Great. Then, the lights started flickering more. One by one, they blinked out behind me. And that's when I saw another figure. This one was standing in the middle of the road, about 50 feet ahead. This time, facing me, I slammed on the brakes. My car stopped just in time. The figure was tall, wearing what looked like a dark coat or cloak. I couldn't see the face. Just a pale hand hanging at the side. Not moving, not walking, just waiting. I honked. No reaction. I turned on the high beams. The light hit them. And for a second, I swear the face looked wrong. It wasn't just pale. It looked stretched, like skin pulled over something that didn't quite fit underneath. The eyes were too wide. The mouth wasn't a mouth. Just a black slit. I panicked. I threw the car in reverse and started backing up, but the tunnel behind me was now completely dark. No lights. Nothing. My own brake lights barely lit anything behind me. And worse, I heard something. Footsteps. Not just one pair, many, coming from both directions. I stopped, breathing hard, gripping the steering wheel. My windows were up, but I could hear them. Slow, dragging steps. The kind of footsteps that shouldn't echo the way they did. Like they were too heavy. Or too wrong. Then my engine died. Out of nowhere. The dashboard went dark. Headlights off. Everything dead. Just silence. And then tapping. On my back window. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to. But the tapping kept going. Slow. Rhythmic. Like someone just lightly knocking with a finger. I don't know how long I sat there frozen. Then came the whispering. Not clear words, just sounds. Like dozens of voices all whispering at once. Some high-pitched, some deep, all around the car. I closed my eyes and told myself it wasn't real. That I must be dreaming, or my mind was playing tricks. But I felt the breath on my neck, right behind my seat. That's when I screamed and grabbed the door handle. I ran, left the car behind and ran into the darkness of the tunnel. I don't know why. I didn't have a plan. I just wanted to get away from whatever was in that car. As I ran, the whispering grew louder. The air felt thick, like I was moving through water. My chest burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop. Then, suddenly, I saw it. Light. A small dot at the end of the tunnel. I ran harder, my shoes slipping on the damp floor. The footsteps behind me were faster now, not dragging anymore, running, many of them. I didn't look back. The light got closer and closer. I could feel the cold giving way to fresh air. I burst out of the tunnel like I was escaping a nightmare. I fell to my knees on the gravel road outside, gasping for breath. And when I looked back, there was nothing. No figures. No footsteps. The tunnel was empty. A car passed by not long after. I flagged them down and thankfully they stopped. I told them my car broke down and they helped me call a tow truck. When the tow truck arrived, they went into the tunnel to pull my car out. It started up just fine when they tried. Not a single problem. I didn't tell them what really happened. Who would believe me? But here's the strangest part. When I got home, I checked the route on my GPS history. There was no record of me ever entering the Hillcrest Tunnel. In fact, the GPS showed I took the newer highway. The tunnel wasn't even on the path. And when I looked up the Hillcrest Tunnel online, it was closed permanently. 10 years ago. Collapsed during a rock slide. No one had driven through it since, so how did I end up there? What tunnel did I drive through that night? I don't have the answer. All I know is this. If you ever see a tunnel that looks too dark, too quiet, and too long, turn around. Don't go in. Some roads take you to places you weren't meant to return from. And if you do go in, and someone taps on your window, whatever you do, don't turn around. This is the story of something that happened to my friend Ethan. I wasn't there, but he told me every detail, and I believe him, because I saw what he became after. He was never the same again. This isn't just a scary story. It's a warning, so listen carefully. Especially if you ever find yourself near an old tunnel with no name. Ethan was one of those guys who didn't scare easily. He'd go camping alone, explore abandoned buildings, even sneak into old mines just for fun. He called it urban exploring, but really, he just liked poking around creepy places to get a rush. One Friday evening, he and his friend Liam decided to check out this old tunnel on the outskirts of town. No one used it anymore. It wasn't even on maps. Local kids called it the Dead Mile, but no one could say why. Just rumors. People who went in and never came out. Strange noises. Flickering lights. Of course, to Ethan, that just made it more exciting. They packed flashlights, some snacks, and a camera. Their plan was simple. Walk through the tunnel, film it, and come out the other side. Then upload it online. Easy. They drove out just after sunset. The road to the tunnel wasn't marked, just a dirt path hidden behind overgrown trees. The air was quiet, too quiet. No wind, no birds, just silence. Liam joked, "It already feels like we're being watched," and laughed. But Ethan noticed his voice sounded shaky. They parked near the tunnel entrance. It was huge, arched in stone, with vines crawling over the top like fingers trying to pull it shut. A cold draft rolled out from the darkness inside. There were no lights, no signs, no graffiti, just a heavy feeling that made your chest tight. Still, they went in. Their flashlights cut through the dark, but only just. The walls were damp and smooth, and the sound of their footsteps echoed way too loud. After about 5 minutes of walking, Liam asked, "How long is this thing?" Ethan checked his watch. 5 minutes in. Shouldn't be much more. But the tunnel didn't end. Another 5 minutes passed, then 10. The walls started to look different. The stones were darker, uneven, almost like they were moving. But whenever they pointed their lights straight at them, the stones looked normal again. Liam stopped walking. "Do you hear that?" Ethan listened. At first, nothing. Then, a faint sound, like scratching. Far ahead or maybe behind. They turned, in a slow circle, lights shaking slightly. Then came the whisper, just one word, "Stop." They froze. "Did you say that?" Liam asked. Ethan shook his head. "We're leaving." They turned around, and the entrance was gone. Where the tunnel entrance had been, there was only more tunnel. Same damp walls, same silence. No sign of the way out. They ran, flashlights bouncing, bags thumping against their sides, panic rising. But no matter how far they went, the tunnel didn't end. Just more of the same. More darkness, more echoing footsteps. Then Liam fell. He hit the ground hard, twisted his ankle. He cried out, grabbing his leg. Ethan knelt down, trying to help him up. But that's when he saw it, a hand. Not Liam's, not his. A pale, bony hand crawling out of the wall behind them. Ethan screamed and pulled Liam up. They hobbled forward, Liam limping, Ethan dragging him. More hands started appearing, out of the walls, out of the floor, even from the ceiling. Grabbing, reaching. Some had too many fingers, some had none. They kept moving, and then the lights started to flicker. Not the flashlights. Those went completely dead. Only a faint green glow now lit the tunnel. It came from strange symbols on the walls, glowing softly. Shapes Ethan didn't recognize. They shifted when you looked at them, changed, twisted, and that's when they saw her. A woman standing in the middle of the tunnel, tall, thin, wearing a long torn dress that dragged across the floor. Her head was tilted to one side, like her neck was broken. Her eyes were black, no pupils. Her mouth stretched far too wide, like her skin had been cut to fit a smile. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She just watched. Liam whispered, "Don't talk. Don't run. Don't move." But Ethan, he couldn't help it. He stepped back. Just one step, and that was enough. The woman glitched. That's the only word he could use. She flickered, like a broken video. 1 second far away, next second inches, from his face. She didn't breathe. Didn't blink. She just stared. Then she whispered something so quietly Ethan barely heard it. "You brought him. Now you can leave." Ethan blinked, and the tunnel lit up. Not bright, but enough to see. The woman was gone. Liam was gone. Ethan was standing alone. He screamed, called out his friend's name. Nothing. Just silence. Then he turned around and saw the tunnel exit. It was there, suddenly, like it had always been. He ran. He didn't stop until he was out, face down on the grass, dry heaving, eyes wide and wet. The stars were out. The night was still. Everything was calm. But Liam never came out. People searched. Police went in, but they said the tunnel was blocked. No way inside. No sign of Ethan's story. No camera, no gear, no trace of Liam at all. But Ethan knew. He remembered. He remembers every time he closes his eyes. That whisper, that smile, those hands. And the worst part? Every night since that day, Ethan hears knocking from inside his bedroom wall. Slow, steady tapping. Sometimes he whispers Liam's name, just to see if it stops. It never does. He moved 3 times. Different houses, different towns. The tapping always follows. And last week, he called me. His voice was shaking. He said, "She's here." Then the line went dead. I haven't heard from him since. So if you ever find yourself on a back road and see an old tunnel with no name, don't go in. Because once you see her, once she sees you, she doesn't forget. This is the story of my good friend Sarah. I've known her since we were kids, and she's always been brave. Maybe a little too brave. What I'm about to tell you happened last year, and since then, she hasn't been the same. It's a story. She warned me never to repeat, but I think it needs to be told. So listen closely, because if you ever hear about an old tunnel hidden deep in the woods, you'll want to think twice before stepping inside. It all started on a chilly October evening. Sarah and her boyfriend, Matt, along with 2 friends, Josh and Emily, decided to go for a hike near the outskirts of their small town. They'd heard about an old abandoned railway tunnel that no one used anymore. A place locals called the Whisper Tunnel, because of strange sounds people sometimes heard coming from inside. They laughed it off, calling it a perfect place for a spooky adventure. With flashlights in hand and backpacks full of snacks, they headed into the forest just as the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees. The path to the tunnel was hidden under thick vines and fallen leaves. When they finally found it, the tunnel's entrance was covered in graffiti and moss, looking like a black mouth ready to swallow them whole. The air near it was colder, and an uneasy silence settled over the group. Maybe this wasn't such a great idea, Emily whispered, but Sarah shook her head. Come on, it's just a tunnel. We'll check it out and leave. No big deal. Matt shone his flashlight inside, and the beam disappeared into the darkness. They stepped in together, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. At first, the tunnel felt empty, just the cold, damp air and the sound of water dripping somewhere far ahead. But after a few minutes, things started to change. Sarah noticed the walls were no longer smooth stone. Strange symbols had been carved into them, twisting shapes that seemed to move when you looked away, and then snap back when you looked again. The air grew heavier, and the silence was broken by a faint whispering, like dozens of voices speaking. All at once, but just out of understanding. Did you hear that? Josh asked, voice low. Probably the wind, Matt replied, but no one really believed him. As they walked deeper, the flashlight beams began to flicker. The whispers grew louder, almost begging. Leave. Leave. Sarah felt her heart pounding. She wanted to turn back, but curiosity pushed her forward. Then, suddenly, Emily screamed. They rushed to her side. She was pointing at the tunnel wall, where a figure was barely visible in the shadows. A woman stood there, pale and wet, her eyes dark and empty. Her hair hung in tangled strands, and her mouth was twisted in a sad smile. Sarah's breath caught. "Who are you?" Emily whispered. The woman didn't answer but raised her hand slowly. Then, the tunnel seemed to shift. The walls groaned and the floor trembled. The air thickened until it was hard to breathe. Suddenly, the flashlight batteries died. Total darkness. Panic took over. Sarah grabbed Matt's hand, and they all tried to find the way back. But the tunnel was no longer the same. The walls seemed to stretch and change, and the whispers turned into screams. Sarah could hear something following them, soft footsteps just behind, but when she turned, nothing was there. They ran blindly, knocking over rocks and stumbling over roots. The woman's voice echoed around them now, clearer, more desperate. "Stay! Stay!" Josh tripped and disappeared into the darkness. "No!" Emily shouted, but it was too late. The tunnel swallowed him whole. Sarah and the others kept running, breath ragged, legs burning. They finally saw a faint light, the exit. They burst out into the night air, gasping and shivering. But when Sarah looked back, the tunnel entrance was gone. Just trees and shadows where it had been. Emily and Matt tried to explain it away as a trick of the light or exhaustion. But Sarah knew the truth. Josh was still inside, and the tunnel had claimed him. Since that night, Sarah won't go near the woods. She says she still hears the whispers, even in her own home. At night, her phone lights up with strange messages. Words she can't understand. Just that same warning. I don't know if it's a curse or something else. But if you ever find yourself near an old tunnel in the woods, remember Sarah's story, because once it calls your name, it might never let you go.